I was told it's Nevada, not Nevada. So. I'm Carl Dermody. I'm the retired, see the big smile, retired K-12 social studies supervisor in Jefferson Parish, Louisiana. Just remember, I'm the one without the accent.
I'm Kate Kirkendall. I'm an attorney working for a nonprofit that supports access to justice.
And I'm Robert Cupp from the former Justice of the Supreme Court of Ohio.
Okay.
My name is Jack Watson, John Watson rather. We are Reno High School representing the great state of Nevada.
I'm Cindy Lawton.
And I'm Chase Taylor. Our coach and unit coach is Mr. Clark.
Let's give them up. I'd like to always thank the teachers for all the time they put in. I know they appreciate all that extra overtime pay they get playing their summer vacation. Someone didn't tell you. But we really appreciate all the time that you put into the program, and I know the students really appreciate it. And I like the purple, by the way. Okay, today we're going to have a discussion. It's not an interrogation. We'll just have a discussion. Thank you. That's relaxed. Don't need to be tense. We're not threatening people. Okay, Unit 4, and today we're going to ask you question 3. Question 3, and I'm going to read it for the benefit of everyone in the audience. Federalism assures a decentralized government that will be more sensitive to the diverse needs of a heterogeneous society. It increases opportunity for citizen involvement in democratic processes. It allows for more innovation and experimentation in government, and it makes government more responsive by putting the states in competition for a mobile citizenry. Do you agree or disagree with the opinion expressed here and why? And please include in your answer the following. Federalism was an entirely new political system invented at the Philadelphia Convention of 1787. What are its essential features and most important principles? And evaluate the claim that one of the values of federalism is that states can act as laboratories of democracy.
In his 1981 inaugural address, President Ronald Reagan stated, "All of us need to be reminded that the federal government did not create the states. The states created the federal government." Before the Revolution, the British unitary system gave the central government too much power. However, the resulting Articles of Confederation left the national government with too little power. The Philadelphia Convention combined aspects of these two systems of government to create federalism, which is a struggle for power between the state and federal governments.
The underlying principles of federalism, including state sovereignty and checks against the federal government, manifest in some of the essential features of the American system of government. In Federalist 51, James Madison stated, "A double security arises to the rights of the people. The different governments will control each other at the same time that each will be controlled by itself." This double security is seen today with the challenge to Citizens United the FEC by Montana and Colorado. Both passed initiatives in the last election to petition the federal government for an amendment overruling the decision.
During the ratification debates, the anti-federalists wanted to preserve state power. The 10th Amendment is the clearest example of this, ensuring that the Constitution only defines the limits on states, not their express powers, while Congress has powers described in Article 1, Section 8. The states also reserve certain police powers in an effort to better their citizens. This can include controlling the National Guard, creating legal punishments, and dealing with land regulation.
We agree with Justice Sandra Leos Connor's view on federalism. It is better suited to the diverse needs of society by ensuring there is a difference of law between the state and federal governments. This can be seen through the 15 states that allowed women to vote before the ratification of the 19th Amendment. It increases citizen involvement through voting for representatives in the 89,055 governments, which gives the public a more personalized connection to their policymakers.
It provides for experimentation among the states. The 2006 Massachusetts Universal Health Care Law was the first time a state experimented with coverage for all of its citizens. It inspired action in several other states and eventually at a federal level. A good example of federalism encouraging competition for a mobile citizenry can be seen in Nevada. While most other states have some kind of personal income tax, Nevada does not. This has encouraged businesses and workers to move to Nevada, as shown through Las Vegas's population growth of 41.8% in 2000.
In his dissent of New State I Company v. Lehman, Justice Louis Brandeis described how states could try novel social and economic experiments without risk to the rest of the country as laboratories of democracy. Throughout history, this dynamic has proven to be especially important. While much attention is given to the fact that marriage law varies by state, divorce law varies almost as much. In the early 1900s, Nevada's loose divorce laws made it much easier to get a divorce much faster than anywhere else. Over time, Nevada's example was copied around the country. Now, only New York has a residency requirement of over 1 year.
Article 1, Section 4, Clause 1 of the Constitution empowers states to make laws regarding voting. Oregon, for example, collects all ballots through mail, while Florida allows individual counties to set polling regulations. In the absence of federal action, states like Arizona have passed stricter immigration bills to stem the flow of illegal immigrants. This action spurred similar laws in 6 other states. Occasionally, state initiatives are brought into a federal level, as seen through California's Air Pollution Control Act of 1947, which was federalized in 1955.
However, laboratories of democracy can also lead to bad effects, such as in 1973. New York passed a series of minimum sentencing laws for drug possession, known as the Rockefeller drug laws. The model spread around the country, leading to the plurality of people in prisons being convicted of non-violent crimes.
In Federalist 45, James Madison stated, "The states will retain under the proposed Constitution a very extensive portion of active sovereignty." The idea of laboratories of democracy embodies Madison's remark. However, oftentimes state sovereignty is overcome by federal supremacy. Thank you.
Thank you. Put away your notes. That's your questions. We'll start with Ms. King.
I'm glad I get to go first this time. In the interest of full disclosure, I'll let you know that I'm from Montana, and the Citizens United issue is a big one there. You pointed out that we've spoken out officially against that federal decision. I'd like to know, since I haven't seen a lot of effects from our official statement, I'd like to know what recourse states have if they feel the federal government has overstepped.
Well, specifically with an amendment, it's a very challenging process. Article 5 of the Constitution says that you're going to need 3/4 of all the states to get any kind of amendment passed. So when we start at a state level, moving to a federal level, it takes a very long time to get anything done. In fact, it's never been done. So in the interests of creating an amendment, it's a very long process, and it's really not the easiest mechanism the states can take. Other things they can do include passing resolutions, expressing discontent like the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions did.
In 2009, 20 states started working on a bill that was called the State Sovereignty Bill. And this wasn't to secede from the nation. This was to show the federal government that they wanted more sovereignty. And they were displeased with how much federal supremacy was happening now.
Additionally, these states can continue to pass legislation that is in direct violation of the decision that they disagree with, the law that they disagree with. And through this, they will eventually be able to potentially get to the Supreme Court and have the Supreme Court reverse the decision.
Thank you.
Interesting discussion between this question, a different question. Who decides whether the federal government or the state government has the authority under the Constitution?
Well, there's certainly an ebb and flow, but ultimately it comes down to Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. This clarifies what Congress's powers are, what the national government can and cannot do. And while the states don't have their powers limited, just their powers enumerated, just their limits, we see that there's this clear distinction in the Constitution in where the federal government can get involved. But history has proved that it's clearly an ebb and flow over time.
Additionally, the Supreme Court can rule whether the state law is overcome by the supremacy clause, such as in New York v. United States. They had a low-level active waste bill, and New York did not want to comply with it. And the take title of that bill said that if the state chooses not to comply with the law, that they had to take responsibility for that waste, and basically they had to comply or else they'd get punished. And the Supreme Court ruled that that was unconstitutional because you cannot force the states to comply to the law.
Additionally, Congress itself ultimately establishes what they are going to interpret is constitutional or not. Because they can ultimately pass a bill whether they want or whether it's constitutional or not. So they have the ability to continue to expand their power regardless of what it is. They did so with the national parks, they did so with the airwaves, and they did so in several other areas in which they did not have direct jurisdiction over, but they felt it was necessary to regulate.
You mentioned Federalist 51 and double security. Can you give me examples in history where double security has failed the American people? Where at both levels in history where that double security wasn't as secure as...
Well, an excellent example would have to be the Jim Crow laws that were very prevalent throughout the early 1900s. These states were not recognizing the rights of minorities and the voting privileges that they could have, and the federal government wasn't getting involved, although Article 1, Section 4, Clause 1 of the Constitution empowers them to. So it was really a situation where the states were doing something wrong, the federal government could have done something, and neither was doing anything to help the population.
Any other examples you can think of?
Not particularly. It's generally a pretty sound.
What about Katrina? Close to, near and dear to my heart. Did the federal and state government fail the people of New Orleans?
Well, with Katrina specifically, you can see an application to Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution, protection from outside invasion. Sometimes this is construed to mean things including weather events, and that makes it, in a sense, a federal issue, something where the federal government needs to get involved, because it can better coordinate everything that's happening. New Jersey and Hurricane Sandy is a recent example where federal involvement with FEMA has proven that the government at a federal level can work more efficiently.
Unless you have Brownie.
There are several powers that states don't have. Why do you think those powers were denied to states?
One example of this would be coining money, because before the Constitution, every state and private industries would ultimately have their own form of money, which made commerce very difficult between the states. So ultimately, with the Constitution and with its prevention of states coining money, it allowed for a more uniform policy and for more commerce to ensue.
In addition, most of Article 1, Section 10 limits the commerce actions of the states, and as Federalist 11 put it, the Union is much better for developing commerce between the states and between foreign nations. It's ultimately more effective at getting that kind of transitionary economic policy that you need. This kind of federalist policy has done wonders throughout history for our economics, and seeing that change, in a sense, has done better for our commerce overall. So, preventing, for example, the taxation of external tariffs on other states has allowed the Constitution to do better.
Thank you. I'll take that extra 20 minutes.
Wow, you guys, I really enjoyed your presentation. I think you guys are a really balanced panel. You all responded to questions and you helped one another out to flesh out the issues. I also thought you did a great job of using our questions to show what you know. Every question you started out with a fact or a reference to history or a source of power, and then you gave an example, which was a really great way to get that across to us.
I agree with that. I thought you demonstrated a very good knowledge of the topic, and you were very good at responding to the questions, reference back to the Constitution, almost every question that we asked, which is pretty impressive.
And I'm going to use a baseball analogy. Chase knocked that question about double security out of the park. Jim Crow is exactly what I had on my mind, being from the South and segregation. And once Hayes took the Union troops out, no protection for African Americans. And he did a very good job with that. Also, if we had time, he's been shortening the time, I think, all day, but if we had time, I want to ask about that voting by mail. Since, not many states have that at the present time, and I was wondering if you might have thought that was kind of lazy democracy. You sit on your couch and fill out a ballot. Is there something about as citizens, us, physically going to the polls and casting that ballot?
From my house all the time.
Lazy. But no, just the devil's advocate thing there. Necessary and proper clause, again, we had time. I was going to ask a question about that. Have presidents abused? Examples of, being a history person, I like historical examples about the executive abuse of power and using the so-called emergency powers. And when Congress has stood up to the executive and not stood up to the executive, how does that balance of power and federalism over time ebb and flow of that power struggle you all talk about? being the last group at 7:15 and a long day, I admire your energy and your intellectual alertness at this late hour. So, thank you very much.